and welcome to Deep Impact, a proud member of the Doof Network where we dive deep into Wildbow's most nice and accurate work 5 years on. Coming up next is Elliot Diebold.
And that was my psychotic co-host, Ruben Morehouse.
I think in this relationship, I'm the Andy and you're the Ava. Let's
Not
clarify.
I already established
Damn it, you've already
I'm the
called
Andy.
And this is what our episode is going to be about today. It's a long-form debate about which of us is the Andy and which is the Ava. No, we're talking about Mala Fide 10.x, which is a gathered pages interlude focusing on Andy and all his writings. It's a fun one. I really like it. It's such... I mean, obviously, the interludes are always super fun for world-building reasons, but this one is especially fun because we finally get to find out, well, not find out, but kind of get a glimpse into how witch hunters and their society, I guess, works. It's great.
Yeah, we sort of finally get insight into the witch hunter segment of the world as a whole.
Yeah, we can just call them the Men of Letters, because that's really what I was reminded of here. In fact, this whole chapter made me think a lot of Supernatural, but, like, coherent, you know?
Good, yeah. No, it was funny. It was, like, seeing that you'd written the Men of Letters reference here in our notes didn't make me hate myself less for making that connection as well. It made me hate you just as much.
Yeah, no, fair.
And I mean, if we have any listeners who don't know what we're talking about, good for you.
If you want to know, just watch like 12 seasons of Supernatural, and that's when they get introduced, I think.
It's well past the point where the show stopped being good.
But
anyway, no, I was very excited when I saw we finally had another gathered pages interlude, because the last one was Black Lamb's Blood, and Wildbow's note to himself at the bottom of that very chapter, I remember, was him sort of saying, that he found it quite hard to inject a narrative into these pages interludes.
I think that he wrote that under the one that was the familiar implement domain one as well, I think.
Yeah, and so, like, I since it had been so long, like, Black Lamb's Blood was the most recent pages interlude, so I kind of assumed that we just weren't going to get any more. So I was very excited to see another one return. And of course, it's in the form of letters, which is, a good way to do a gathered pages one, but also hit that narrative bit, because obviously, I mean, this is the way stories were told. In fact, like, the gothic horror genre, for me, is sort of defined by Dracula and Frankenstein.
Which were in these styles, Yeah,
exactly. So, I'm a big fan. In fact, like, the last segment of this chapter sort of drops it and just cuts to third person, and I was honestly a little disappointed. I would have liked to maybe get some extra insight into what Andy was thinking about this after it happened, but
yes, we're still kind of in Andy's perspective, and there are some interesting things like him stopping Ava from shooting the first time but letting her shoot the second time, but it definitely would have been good to get a bit more into his head for this stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. I was a little bit bummed that the gathered pages was taken away, like, when we don't get very many of them. But, like, it's still it's a good chapter.
Yeah. So let's dive into it, shall we?
Yeah.
So of course, the first thing I want to bring up is how much I hate Ava, and here's a little quote to support that. Andy writes, one of the first lines in this whole chapter is talking about a katana that has been given to them, and he passed it off to Ava, and he writes, "All the same, the gift bought me a week of her listening to me. That matters a lot. Thanks again." So yeah, she's basically just a child. I mean, a lot of his time seems to go to managing Ava, and there's this interesting part later on where he kind of gets called out by her and realizes that he shouldn't be putting himself above her so much, or at least that's what I read into it, but I still think that he can, because she's crazy and not an adult.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like she requires pretty substantial monitoring. I mean, what's kind of cruel about this chapter is we learn so much about these two, and yet there's still so much more. Like we're almost teased with the details on, what has made... Ava's clearly scarred by something. Like, it's not... I mean, I think based on what Andy says, it's kind of clear that she was born as a bit of a wild card, because she was like sword fighting goblins and stuff at a very young age. So I think it would be hard for a normal adjusted person to come from that sort of background. but I mean, it seems pretty clear that something else has happened that's made her really go off the edge. And so I feel sorry for her. I obviously feel sorry for Andy. You know, it's that class. Everyone is the victim in here, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, it's obviously a shitty situation for everyone. I still can dislike Ava though, and I will. So
yeah, no, that's fair. So something I think we've got to jump into, because I think it's something that's very strong throughout this chapter, is Andy and Ava as I don't know if foils is the right word, but like something to compare to Blake and Rose. Like,
yeah,
am I remembering right? Andy and Ava are twins.
yes, they're twins,
right? Yeah, and obviously, you know, you can view Blake and Rose as twins.
I mean, I think that's a fair way to describe them.
Yeah, I mean, it's the closest normal human analogy that I've got.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because, like, two of the biggest things I think that have defined Blake versus Rose has been like being the book person versus the person who jumps in.
Yeah.
And being a good person versus being an asshole.
Well, yeah, I suppose that's fair.
I mean, recently at least.
Yeah.
And Andy and Ava are kind of the same like duality, but the combinations are different. Like Andy is the nice guy and the bookworm, whereas Rose is the evil one and the bookworm. And then obviously Ava and Blake are kind of the impulsive ones, but I'd argue Blake is a better person than Ava.
Yes, I definitely think Blake is a better person than Ava. I do think it's not as clear cut that Blake is a better person than Rose. I still think he is, but I think it's I think they're a lot more nuanced than that.
Yeah, I am very much generalizing and simplifying to sort of build this, but I think that's sort of that's the point I get with that. That's why I think this works as a sort of ability to contrast and compare them.
Yeah.
Like, because I agree, it isn't always that cut and dry, and I think that, you know, having these two who, like, I think it's fair to say recently in the story we can label Rose as the bad one out of her and Blake.
I think that's fair.
And at least from Blake's perspective of the last arc. So I think it's interesting to compare these two with this sort of different combination of the same basic ingredients.
Yeah, I really like the way that, obviously we're a lot on Blake's side here, and I'm definitely more on Andy's side in the Andy-Ava dynamic, where Andy, he sees himself and he kind of is like, he has to watch over Ava when she does her impulsive plans. I love that because it forces us to kind of think about, well, wait, was Rose having to do that with Blake? She kind of was back in the day, right? So it kind of gives you a newfound respect for Rose in some ways.
No, I did have the thought, like Andy talks about, you know, how, this is good, it helps me keep Eva in control for a week. And you got to wonder if Rose ever had moments like that where there was something that happened and she was like, oh, good, this will keep, you know, Blake sort of feeling guilty and like he'll have to do things for me for a week.
Yeah.
I'm not having trouble picturing her thinking like that right now, given what's gone down recently.
I mean, maybe sticking him in the mirror is her way of controlling him for a week.
He's in the timeout corner.
Yeah, exactly. The timeout mirror, we call it. Yeah. So some other interesting bits. You kind of mentioned that we get more insight into the background of these two here, but it doesn't get resolved fully, which I agree with. There's this line where Andy is writing to Mr. Samaniego, and writes something along the lines of, Sandra has made it clear she knows who you are and would rather you stay away, which is so, like, it's the kind of world-building line that just makes me ache for all of the side stories of all these characters.
Yeah, it's funny how, like, I don't think anyone would call this a short story, but it still feels like there's so much more out there.
Yeah.
Which I think is what makes it so good. You know, that sense that there's been more thought put into this world than what we explicitly see.
Yeah, there really is infinite space to play in, right? Like, you could imagine a whole series of books that are just about, you know, Samaniego or Creevy or whoever and their adventures being witch hunters. And it'd be a completely different thing to Pact, but would still be, like, its own interesting space to play in.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, like, it's interesting because we learn a lot about witch hunters in this chapter, but we still don't have the full picture. But, like, it's pretty easy to imagine why Sandra doesn't want more witch hunters in town.
I agree, especially considering the way that Andy ends this chapter. I definitely don't want more of them around. Um, one other interesting note that I want to pull out, which I thought was quite funny, is Andy reminds Mr. Samniego that your average practitioner will be able to look and see if something's watching them, even if it's a camera. And it's this interesting dynamic where it feels like Andy. I mean, Samniego probably already knows this, right? Because he's a witch hunter, but Andy's mentioning it anyway, and it gives me this vibe. And later parts also give me this vibe of Andy being this young guy who kind of is relied on for tech support for the other crew, which is a very kind of human thing that I quite liked. It was an interesting way to color their relationship here.
Yeah, like it definitely reminded me of, when I've handed off things to my parents, like after I've had to set up a computer or like a wireless router for them, and you just make sure to explain all the basics because you're not sure what they do and don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be called up and then be told that you didn't tell them X or something. So yeah, I agree. It does feel very just sort of human was the perfect word for it. And I mean that would be how I describe this entire network. But we'll get into that in a bit.
Well, yeah. So the next letter is Mr. Samniego's response back to Andy, basically chit chatting a bit and then offering some advice and some help if he needs it.
Yeah, and well, yeah. Let's just get into it. I mean, the other big thing in this chapter is that we see that the witch hunters are just networking and communicating and being nice to each other and helping each other out. And it's like, I'm so on their side now. Like,
yeah, wait, practitioners can do that?
Well, apparently not, but the witch hunters can.
Oh, yeah, true. Fair.
And, like, as far as I'm concerned now, the witch hunters are the heroes of this story. Ava is more of a hero than Blake, is clearly the takeaway here.
No, you're right. The fact that they're communicating is so important, right? And it's clearly it like elevates their ability to handle stuff so much more. One of the things that I don't think we mentioned that much in our notes here, but is kind of consistently reinforced is the fact that Andy and Ava have had training drilled into them of keeping journals, just so that for themselves, but also in case anything happens to them, things can kind of get picked up from where they were left off. And it's all these things, all these systems that these witch hunters have that are designed to make the lives of other people easier. It's so refreshing to see people who treat this like in a smart way.
Yeah, and so much less of a selfish way. Like it's so much more selfless. Like they seem. It's interesting because I still don't know what, like, big picture, the plan of witch hunters is.
Yeah. What do they get out of this, right?
Yeah. I at the moment, I'm assuming they just sort of see themselves as the people who keep it under control. Like, they stop it from going too far. Like, they're clearly not indiscriminate about how they attack practitioners and others. But they seem to. I assume that they view themselves as the people who stop it from going too far.
Yeah, I guess they're
varying degrees of success.
They're kind of police to an extent, right? Both policing others, but also policing practitioners, making sure that practitioners who step out of line get punished. And I think this came up early on in the first or second arc, where they were kind of referenced as a kind of mechanism for karma to be enacted.
Yeah, that was sort of indirect, but yeah, like I agree. I'm kind of. It's interesting because of the way, like, they do almost feel like a bit of a counter system to practitioners in a way. I'm trying to think, if we view this whole society of practitioners and others through a lens of, like, comparing it to real world societies and systems, like the story's kind of doing. I'm not sure exactly where I want to put witch hunters or like who I want to compare them to, but they're this interesting sort of counterbalance where they sit kind of outside the system and are designed to control it.
Yeah. Yeah, or at least measure it and like make sure it, like, keep it measured, I guess is the phrase.
Or try to. I mean, there's only so much you can do.
Only so much you can do before you just need to whip out the old rocket launcher and wipe the slate. Yeah, no, I think they do play a very interesting role. And I'm excited by the fact that Andy having an interlude hopefully means that we will see more of him coming up.
Yeah, me too. I hope so.
So, yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this. It's really juicy world building, right? And I love it. It's just like, it's so fun being inside the world of these witch hunters. I want to see more of it.
Yeah, absolutely. This fleshes the world, a whole new part of the world out so much more. And yeah, at the same time, feels like we're barely getting a snapshot of
Yeah.
it. Yeah, this first half of the chapter is for me all about establishing the existence of this network and kind of using that directly and indirectly to point out kind of how much better this network is than practitioners,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. So much better than just leaving mysterious notes in your library that don't really help anybody.
Oh,
um,
and just leaving problems until they're big enough that you have to deal with them because you didn't talk to anyone else who might have known that this was going to be a big problem.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, the example I like the most is obviously practitioners communicate in their own circles, right? The Duchamps communicate in their own circles, etc. But the isolation, like, I like the example of the Knights of the Basement as a great way of if they had been communicating with another group, like, can you imagine how much more closure at least they would have gotten? I mean, or
Yeah.
even they might have been successful because we don't know how much they failed against the Erasure Demon. Things like that just kind of defy this silo approach to being a practitioner.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things we saw when Blake got hit by was how many people sort of had bits and pieces. Like, the shepherd had been keeping track of every time this happened, and
Yeah.
Isadora was able to block it when she knew it was coming. Like, there's all
Yep.
these pieces of puzzles that could have come together better if everyone was doing what these people are doing.
Maybe one day these practitioners will learn to communicate. But anyway, so
Yeah.
the next segment, the next gathered page is a note that Andy leaves himself, basically talking about how important it is for him to maintain a diary and that he hasn't been doing it.
Yeah, it's basically just a note on how bad he is at doing this part of the job, and really how bad he is at doing the whole job, and how he doesn't like it at all.
Yes, and that's kind of the purpose of this portion, right? This is a short little note, but it's here to kind of start us thinking about Andy hating his job and kind of get us a bit curious, I think, about why he's doing it.
Yeah, and of course we'll go into this a bit more, but we haven't explicitly said it, so I just want to say it. Like this whole thing, he's doing it to keep a promise that
Yep.
on a universal scale he doesn't have to keep.
Yes.
And again, we've just been talking about how practitioners don't communicate, and it's worth pointing out practitioners aren't communicating even though they all have to tell the truth. These people are all communicating even though they can just lie to each other, and it all comes back to that thing about how like practicing's just the worst because somehow being able to not lie makes you more likely to be dishonest. It's
I don't
crazy.
think
I
it's
love it.
practitioning being the worst. I think it's just practitioners, Elliot. Like,
Well, same.
yeah. Yeah, I want to touch on this promise because obviously it's hinted at throughout this entire chapter, but we never actually find out what this promise is. It's
Yeah.
presumably it feels like the kind of thing where it's a mentor died for Andy/Ava, and their dying words was, "Oh, take care of this," and Andy was like, "Yeah, I promise I will," or something like that, right? That's kind of
Yeah.
the narrative spot that it seems to occupy. Although obviously, if we do find out what it is, I expect it to be a little bit cleverer than a very standard cliche. But it's that's kind of where it feels like it occupies, and it kind of is getting to the point through Andy feels like he's getting to the point where I don't know why he thinks this promise is the right thing for him to keep.
Yeah.
It
No, I'm on the
feels
same page. I'm
Mm.
fascinated to learn why he's placing so much weight on this because like it seems like it's doing him no good, and keeping Ava on the board is also doing nobody any good. So
Yes, I'm
yeah.
I'm gonna go sit in my little armchair psychology armchair for a second because it does feel to me like Andy talks about. I think it's this note that we're discussing right now where he mentions that if he doesn't keep the diary, he kind of falls apart without structure, right? And this is something that I can kind of
Mm-hmm.
empathize with, where you need a bit of structure in your life to keep you doing the shit that you really want to do.
Yeah.
I worry that Andy is that kind of person where he thinks that if I don't maintain this promise, that's it. I'm just gonna kind of, I don't know, fall into a slump or not do anything, or I don't know what I would be. And so to him, that is scarier than just maintaining the promise, which is something that he kind of doesn't want to do.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, maybe. I'd question that logic, but
Yeah, I would too.
like,
But
sure.
yeah.
I mean, I think the really like one of the really interesting things that comes out of this is, Andy mentions that he doesn't plan to leave a legacy on the world. Like he doesn't want to be remembered or anything, which is, I think very indicative of, poor self-esteem at the very least.
Yeah.
And it contrasts interestingly. Like, it reminded me of something Blake has sort of talked about a couple of times, about how Blake didn't necessarily see himself having kids, but he's always someone who's wanted to have an impact on the world and didn't want the world to forget him, which, it did. But
Whoops.
it's interesting because Andy sort of says, "Oh, it's very human to want to leave a legacy, but I don't want to." The ironic thing being that as a non-practitioner, he's one of the most human people in the story, and we have Blake, who's one of the most questionably human people in the story, and yet Blake is apparently conforming to this human norm more than Andy.
Yeah, it's interesting Andy saying that, because he is someone who cares so much about his kind of catalogue of knowledge, right? I wonder what legacy he thinks he wouldn't be leaving behind, considering that part of his legacy will, presumably, as a witch hunter, be the knowledge that he's gained and catalogued over the course of his life.
Yeah, but he almost doesn't. He's just doing that because it's part of the job. I feel like he's kind of doing this as much out of obligation as the rest of it. He doesn't like keeping the diary. He made that very clear just before. He's just doing it because that's what he's meant to do.
Yeah. I wonder, because in Pact, your legacy kind of is the knowledge that you leave behind, right? I mean, that's really what you're leaving your descendants. I wonder if his plan then extends to burning the files or something. Which, I mean, if you want to break the wheel, that's one way to do it.
I mean, or rocket launching everyone. Like, there's again, a bunch
there's multiple ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the next gathered page is a little report that Andy writes about a frog spirit that they hunted and killed, or bound, that was kind of terrorizing school children.
I love how this opens. I never would have guessed frog spirit based on how this starts. It's such a fun little snapshot into what these sorts of people have to deal with.
Yeah. It's such a weird little... Because it is like its own little, I don't know, one moment murder mystery kind of thing, right? Where it's, oh, we've got this setup. What is it? Who knows? Oh, it's this. Okay, cool. We've wrapped it up. And it's a very kind of quick little snippet about what could really be a whole chapter in Andy's novel,
Yeah, well, it's the abridged report of, like, a Monster of the Week episode.
Yeah, and I love that. I love this one, and I love the ones we get later. They're so fun. They're just kind of like, abridged little Monster of the Week things where you feel like you get all the kind of juicy bits of like, ooh, a mystery. Oh, and it was this. Oh, okay, cool. And they took it down. Cool. And there's a little bit of like hints of what it could be. Like, yeah, it's fun. It's fun stuff.
Yeah, I mean, to talk about some of the later ones, like, I think Wildbow does a really good job of knowing which details to drop to keep them. He makes them feel very varied and also very, interesting. Like, there's the one with the little plant kid who goes home to a house and then just stands there all night. And but that's just one little detail, and it makes the whole thing fucking terrifying. And it's just like, and then we killed it. And then there was a parent, and we killed that.
Yeah.
It's so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. This page is also kind of ramping up. I mean, this whole chapter is kind of ramping up what we were talking about in 10.1 and 10.2, where the numbers of others and the types of others that are in the town are really starting to build up. And that's one of the main things this chapter is doing, is really kind of getting us, continuing the mindset of get ready for things to pop off in Jacob's Bell, because, of course, the way this interlude ends is things popped off in Jacob's Bell.
I mean, that's been a big thing. This entire arc has been, showing us that Jacob's Bell is a bigger and bigger dam than we thought, and it's got more and more cracks than we thought. And it's just, this chapter lays a lot more seeds on that, and implies that it's been building up even longer than we thought.
Yes. Which is interesting. I wonder how that will play into the story going forward. I really like the way that, obviously, the last two chapters had to kind of be a bit more personal than the start of this arc was. The start of this arc was very much like giving us a snapshot of the town.
Hmm.
And then we got back to the personal stuff with Mags and Molly and Rose and Blake. And now this interlude's able to kind of ramp us back up, bring back those themes from the early chapters of this arc, and then set it all in motion.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Also, one interesting bit from the Frog Spirit section before we move away from that is Andy references it as a job that came from the council, but it kind of becomes clear later that he's talking about the Young Justice Society that was forming before Maggie Holt lost her name to Padraig.
Yeah.
So, that's fun. Like, I'd actually sort of forgotten about this junior council, and we're being reminded of them. I'm wondering if they're gonna, show up as a bit of a player as things pop off in Jacob's spell. It's interesting.
Guess we haven't had a chance to interact with them, right? Because now we're back in Blake's head, and he hasn't really interacted with them at all.
No.
We'll see, I suppose. So Andy next responds to the letter that he got from Mr. Samaniego, and he basically asks for help in identifying all the others that are coming to town, because there are so many that he can't keep up with it all.
Yes, and in fact, they talk about setting up an other wiki, some sort of magic wiki, and it's finally happening.
I'm surprised they don't have one already, honestly.
Well, it kind of seems like most of these guys are pretty old-fashioned, and it's the younger generation kind of changing it up with the technology.
Yeah, fair enough. So coming soon, we'll be able to Google Faceless Woman and see exactly what she is. So here's another little note from this, where Andy mentions the rocket launcher, and he says in this letter, Ava and I would very much like to have our rocket launcher. I talked about it with her in the sense of the general situation, and she agreed. No jokes, no apparent manipulation. And it's nice that Andy has to put in no jokes, no apparent manipulation in there, just to reassure Mr. Samaniego that, yes, he's thinking that about it, and Ava, yes, would be likely to joke or manipulate in a situation like this, but he's pretty sure that she didn't, so that's fun. She's a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, but it really sells this moment, right? Like, it reminds me of all those times we've joked about how, if Blake and Rose are on the same page about something, shit's serious, and this is just doing the same thing. It's Andy basically saying, hey, Ava and I agree that this is serious and we need it, so it's probably serious and we probably need it.
Yeah. This brings to mind a question, actually, which is, Andy makes reference to the fact, I think it's in this chapter, that Ava, he thinks, would be able to take out any of the practitioners in town, right? But he's the one with the rocket launcher plan at the end, not Ava. It's interesting that he sees himself doing that as opposed to having Ava do that. I wonder what your read on that is.
Well, I'm all got the impression, because Eva's more focused on close quarters combat,
Sure.
for want of a better term. Like, she's someone you send after someone specifically, whereas Andy's the one with the hunting rifle or the rocket launcher who, is the long range sort of thing.
That makes sense.
I also, I think part of him would maybe want to shelter Eva from that a bit. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting exactly where he stands with her. I think part of him would like to try and get her out of all this, if he thinks that's at all possible. I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder. I don't know. I feel like she's pretty deep in it at this point. I wonder what would need to happen to even consider having her kind of come out of the life.
Yeah, a lot, I imagine.
Yeah. So our next note that we get is Andy kind of reflecting on himself and Ava and his promises. And this note kind of talks about how he's noticed that he's slipping, and he kind of has realized that he almost gave up on his life. He almost gave up and let himself be caught in a situation quite recently.
Yeah, and I think for me this is the most central or most important letter in the whole collection. Yeah, I mean, obviously it hits us again with that idea that Andy has noticed how much everything is ramping up and all the others are becoming more active and adding to that feeling that something really big is coming. But then he goes on this sort of fairly long tangent about what the practice might be doing by existing.
Yeah.
He sort of talks about how he doesn't think that practitioners follow others, and he doesn't think that it's just all others are practitioners who've turned. He says that there's theory that Fae were originally practitioners, so that, that whole thing that we've heard about before. But Andy theorizes that maybe there's something to the practice that attracts the monsters, like it's something that calls to them.
Yeah, which I mean makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I wonder if this is something that's going to be explored further, because like I can see a lot to it, like the idea that practitioners, and the book's talked about this a lot, how the more you sort of practice, the more you sort of become other to some degree. And I wonder if maybe, every time you lose a bit of your humanity and become more other as you're practicing, is that something that others in the area can feed off of? I don't know, because, we've seen, a lot of them jump at the chance to become a familiar, because apparently that gives you a taste of that sweet mortal life that is apparently such a big deal.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, or, is it disrupting the spirits or the foundation of the universe to some degree? Like it's such an interesting theory on the foundations of this very world. Like I can't help but feel that if this ever comes back or is relevant, it's tying into probably the very foundation of where Pact is going to end up.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we've talked so much over the course of this story about concepts of kind of radiation, and if that's where that's kind of where this slots into me. I feel like being a practitioner, you have this radiation of otherness. You radiate otherness around you, and I suspect that's kind of where it fits into my head with what Andy's saying here.
Yeah, well, it's just so interesting because like humans fit such a unique role in this universe, seemingly.
Yeah.
Like it seems to mostly be humans that say create manifestations, or maybe even lead to the creation of gods. Like I guess we don't know whether it's a chicken or egg situation with gods, whether they're created and then people start believing in them, or vice versa. But like, yeah, I could see, the fact that humans are dedicating themselves to the world of the practice somehow empowering that world and empowering the others, which, is basically the radiation you're talking about, I guess.
Yeah.
But it sort of, it validates the existence of the others in the area, by humans sort of delving into it.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder. Because you're right that humans play such an interesting role, because they're not, like, they're just not like anything else, right? And I mean, maybe that's a human-centric viewpoint, because I guess others aren't like anything else either, right? It's interesting.
No, but like the position humans can take as innocent and all the special protections that come with it seems very unique to humankind.
Yes, but those come from the Seal of Solomon, right? Which he was a human, so he was, the human that made this, of course, is going to kind of treat humans as the innocent species. But you can kind of imagine that if there was a Solomon that was a goblin, right, he would set up a thing, and he managed to, get as much power as the actual Solomon human did. He would set up a thing where, okay, well, fairy can't just prey on goblins by default, unless they're, non-innocent goblins, or whatever it is, whatever that fucking means.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess, yeah, you're right. Maybe it's more, humans seem of the mortal world, whereas most of the others seem like they really trace themselves back to, the spiritual dimension or something. And I don't know. It's
I kind of agree.
There's a lot you can sort of think about here. I guess I don't know enough to really claim much for certain.
Yeah. It does feel like a bit of a chicken and egg thing as well, where it could be, yes, humans are just kind of the default species here, but it could also be that just kind of by chance humans became the default species, and then, their perception influenced the spirits to shape everything else into what it is now, and that's not actually what it was like, however many years ago that the Earth Impact was created.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess part of the reason humans often take a bit of a special role in universes like this is because thematically it's great as this idea that like humans are the ones that can make a difference, and it's kind of a very easy way to say, our humanity is special and unique to us, and that's what makes us special and unique. So I think that's why it's fairly common, and maybe it's just because it's so common I'm sort of bringing it into Pact.
But
I think that thematically it does fit into this story, because this story's been talking a lot about the existing system and how humans might be able to change that, and I think that special role of humans in the universe fits thematically here as it does in so many other stories.
Yeah, I wonder. This makes me wonder two things. One is, I wonder if any animals like gorillas or dolphins or whatever, any of the animals that are smart, pigs, if they have their own mythologies in Pact, like, is there a version of that exists? What do pig spirits, like the spirits for the pigs, look like? What does that operate like? And the other question is, what would happen if aliens came down to the world of Pact, right? How would they interact with the existing system? Is it human-centric, or would any sentient species that isn't an other, in air quotes, be able to, impact the world in some way? This is obviously never going to be answered, in fact, but it's the kind of stuff I love thinking about. It's an interlude. This is the time we think about these things.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would assume any sentient species could potentially end up in a situation like humans are in now.
Because the line, the line for Blake between human and other is already so blurry, and it does seem like, and Molly is another example, right? Molly is clearly an other, but she practiced magic. She influenced the spirits, like... She's not a human. I don't know.
Sorry, to go back to your alien example, the problem with the aliens is they would never come and visit because they're too busy not lying to each other and thus being dishonest.
And they would communicate and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't know.
We need those alien witch hunters to come down and give us a hand.
You mean Martian Manhunter? That's the alien witch hunter. Anyway, we've gone off on a real side note here. Let's bring it back. So this is the part where Andy's kind of reflecting on his promise, and I don't know, at the ending here where he kind of psychs himself back up to keep agreeing to his promise. It feels sad, but it also feels like a mixed bag, because the next few notes, he's kind of back in form. He kind of gets back to form and seems to be doing okay. Like, seems to be excelling within the structure that he's forced himself to adhere to. So, I don't know. I kind of feel like either he's had a slump and he pulls himself out of it, or he's kind of deceiving himself in his notes. It's hard to tell which one's happening.
I think the vibe I got is that you're right, he pulls himself out of a funk, but I don't think he gets to the point where he's happy with where he is. He's just kind of making do better.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't make it so that he actually enjoys where he is. He just manages to make things a bit easier so that he can cope better.
Yeah.
Which is not really fixing the problem. But it's a very relatable thing. Like, I don't think I'm the only person who relates to that sort of mentality.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of tragic in a way. Yeah, it's on some level. Yeah.
Yeah. So then he's kind of back out of his funk, updating notes, and he accidentally lets slip some very break the wheel mentality.
Yeah, we really are seeing this from just about every young person in the story at some point, right? Not
just young people. Like, so this is the thing. The more I hear about how many people want to break the wheel, the less I believe it's actually going to happen. Like, so obviously we first heard about it with Eamon and Rose Senior, right? That came out probably. I mean, that was around the time of Black Lamb's Blood as well. So that stuff all kind of happened together, and it really felt like, oh yeah, they can actually do it. Like, they've got a plot, they're doing it. But then the more we hear about it, the more we hear like, oh yeah, Laird wanted to break the wheel. Oh yeah, Sandra wanted to break the wheel. Like, the more we hear that these people have kind of had these desires, the more it feels like if it was going to happen, it would have already happened. And we're just kind of in the part of the cycle where people think about breaking it, but don't actually do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is something Pact has, as you sort of said, has been dealing with for a while. Like, this idea that you sort of try to break the system, and then often you just end up becoming a part of it. Like, you either get beaten down or beaten into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could even say that we sort of saw that with some of the other people, like Fell or something.
Yeah.
I agree. It's one of those things where it feels like everyone sort of has this idea of, I want to break the wheel too, but there's so many different ideas of how you want to do it, and it's such a monumental task that would involve getting everyone to work together, really.
Yeah, I want to break the wheel, but I'll do it tomorrow, basically.
Yeah. It's like Black Lamb's Blood said, with these sorts of systems that perpetuate themselves and stuff, like, you need to kind of get everyone on board for the same plan, and it's just so much easier said than done for everyone but the witch hunters. So, I mean, I can't wait to sort of see. I feel like this is going to be a factor in the next 6 arcs. I can't wait to see how it manifests.
Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully it does manifest. Hopefully the wheel gets broken. So Andy's back to form, and together with Ava, they kill all kinds of things. Yay!
Yeah, I mean, mostly yay. Some of these are a bit.
Yeah, can we talk about some of these? Okay, so a lot of them are others, and we've already talked about this. You can kill others; it's fine. They don't count. they're
What?
freebies.
Hold on.
Whoa. No. We're not. We're not
we landed anywhere on that one, did we?
No, but putting that aside, putting aside the grey areas. Two of them are actually just practitioners, like actually just full-on human people. One is a kind of outsider practitioner who made a bid for leadership. And so Andy blew him up with a car bomb, which, all right, that feels a bit loaded. And then the other one is a practitioner kind of hanging out with the Duchamps and role-playing a Duchamp, and they get sniped. And it's like, I mean, I guess they technically did things that were bad, or kind of. I mean, not even that bad. Not even that bad. Like, it feels very extreme.
It does kind of feel like killing these people probably served Sandra and or Johanna's more than say the others, which were general
I would
people.
say, yeah, and they're just kind of slipped it like. It's like a list of 10 things, and you're like, okay, yeah, it's another, don't care about those, obviously, that's fine. And then slipped in there is one or two, like, oh, a practitioner who was pretending to be a Duchamp, so I killed him with my 150-meter caliber rifle, whatever. And it's like, oh, wait, hold on. That's a practitioner? That's a person, right?
Yeah, but I think that's the point, like, for me, like, this list has both, and because that I had the same instinctive reaction. I was like, but wait, those are people. And then, I guess the person who grew up in Stargate with me has learned to then take a step back and say, okay, but why do I care more about the people than I do
humans.
about the others?
They're not just others that you can kill without even worrying about it. They're people.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, you can't argue that. I feel
I do disagree, but I don't think this conversation's going to go anywhere. But
I was just talking about not being so human-centric, and obviously I've just played into that. No, I agree with you, but it definitely, I don't know. You're right.
Well, I think including the humans sort of calls the whole thing into question a bit.
Yeah,
I think that's why they're peppered in there.
And I want to pull out this one line that's towards the end where Andy says, I don't enjoy the killing, but I was proud of that last one. Which is like, I'm going to rephrase that for him here. I don't enjoy the killing, but I enjoyed sniping this practitioner. It was a fun little challenge, like a game of duck hunt. Yay. Like, that's what he's saying, basically, right?
I mean, yeah, like, I think the charitable read is him sort of saying, well, I don't enjoy that it's killing people, but it was a pretty good shot.
Yeah.
And I mean,
which is horrible.
Yeah, I mean, that's the most charitable read, and it's not a very good one.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. It sort of shows the negative side of these witch hunters. Like, we've just talked about how much they're networking and trying to sort of stop the bad things, but this list sort of helps point out to us that part of that stopping the bad things is just kind of killing people without, trial.
Yeah, so
they're judge, jury, and executioner.
Just to clarify,
basically.
You said Andy's definitely the good one, Ava's definitely the evil one, right? Black and white, clear as day.
I mean, as clear as Blake and Rose.
Yeah. No, very muddy, I would say. So finally, this chapter kind of ends with Andy. I mean, I say ends, but it's a fair chunk. This chapter towards the end starts talking about what happened at this impromptu council meeting with Mags and Molly, and how did they not end up as BFFs forever? We get to see it, and it starts out like we kind of mentioned. It starts out as a page, but then it kind of transitions into being a kind of third person perspective focused on Andy.
Yeah. So, I mean, what's interesting here is, of course, Mags and Molly's deal not really going anywhere is not even at all what ends up being the problem.
Yeah.
It's still kind of Molly's fault, but let's get into it.
Is it, though? We'll talk about that in a moment. So, the one thing I want to talk about first is... Before this happened, the last thing we saw Mags do is talking to Blake and saying, like, oh, I'm going to fight it every step of the way. And she felt very, like, gung-ho about it. And she comes in and she makes the weakest, like, she's making such weak arguments in such a weak way. I kind of forget how bad Mags is at some of this practitioner stuff sometimes.
Yeah, I think they're actually fairly good arguments, but I agree that she's not. She doesn't present them in the most convincing manner.
Yeah, her argument for why this isn't her siding with the Thorburns is she asks Molly, "Hey, do you like Rose?" And Molly's like, "Nah." And then Max is like, "See, what more do you need?" I mean, it's not a great argument.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a valid argument, but I don't know. I don't know if that's the best way to present it. I mean, there's a bunch of really nice bits in this whole conversation, though. Like the bit where Sandra sort of pleads with Mags to prove her wrong and stuff is quite touching. There's always many
that is
like
nice.
there's always so many touching Sandra moments. Like she's so surprisingly like she's a character I'm like very often feeling empathy towards, despite kind of being the worst.
Yeah, like I feel like I could feel so much empathy towards her if she just didn't keep doing bad shit.
Yeah, like she at the same time as being someone who I'm always like, oh, this is so sad
Poor
for Sandra.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she's the person who is standing for keeping things as they are right now, which is a terrible fucking position to be in.
She's the one who has agency to make the decisions, and she always goes, "Oh no, I have to kill Max now. I have to blah blah blah." And it's like, well, no, you don't, Sandra. you can change these decisions.
Yeah. Also, I think the tone here is kept quite light by our favorite Dunko. Keeping it real.
Duncan. Yeah, I love how Max just totally dunks on him a few times, and everyone just is like fine with it. It's great.
Yeah, nobody calls her out on it, and in fact, I'm beginning to become convinced that the Bahams probably do have something legit up their sleeve.
Yeah,
like I mean, they're literally biding their time, presumably.
Yeah, I think Duncan is just the I don't know, the fake front that lulls them into a sense of security. Like, oh, Duncan's in charge? Oh, it's fine then.
Yeah, and I think like the impression Andy almost gives is that he thinks Duncan is doing that intentionally. Like Duncan is kind of presenting a shitty face for the Bahams as part of his job. Like he knows he's doing that. Which is
big
like
level
such an interesting it's so good. Like I can't wait. I think they're going to be a late player and they're just going to come in and fuck shit up, and I can't wait.
We'll see. So one other note that's interesting here is someone says something and then the line goes, Andy saw Mags look at Faisal, then Johannes. Something up there. With the indication kind of being from the text that Johannes or Faisal have something to do with Molly dying or becoming sentient. It's obviously a little vague. Probably with her becoming sentient, which is interesting.
Yeah, that does seem to be the implication, and you're right. It's very interesting. I have no idea what to do with it. I'm filing that away in the for later part of my brain.
Yeah.
Because I mean, Molly was on her way to Johannes's domain when she died, right? That was something we learnt. Early in Arc 9, I think. No, sorry, early in Arc 10.
I wonder if we're meant to think that Molly becoming sentient again is kind of a Johannes play to maybe then be able to control her and get some influence over the Thorburns through that, or I don't know.
I mean, that's definitely where my brain went. Like, I do agree that that's sort of where we're meant to go. But I've read enough of this book now to know that just because the book's telling me something is true, that doesn't mean it is.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I'm keeping my healthy paranoia alive and not committing to anything.
Yeah. So, Molly's here, and she's making demands of the council, because of course they did kill her, so okay, fair enough.
Fair.
She demands a sacrifice of one child from each of the major families in exchange for her, letting it go, I guess.
Karmically, seems fair.
Yeah.
Morally, it bit less so. This is pretty crazy, Molly.
They did kill her. They did kill her, and...
Yes, so the solution is more killing, of course.
Well, but when you're in a position, when you're able to be like, you know what, this seems like a fair deal for the people who killed me. I feel like it's hard to make a super reasonable argument, and Molly's one, I don't know. It's pretty fair. I can't be too down on it because they did kill her.
Yeah, but maybe Well, yeah, I mean, they'd never give their own lives, so no point calling for
Yeah,
that.
of
But they were
course.
never going to give their children. I mean, the ironic thing here, like, I love this. I'm convinced this is Wildbow having a bit of fun. The bit where everyone has a child to kill, except for Johannes. Of course, he has no children. Um,
Yeah.
which is, like his whole thing with Pied Piper and kids is, it's just like this. I think just a fun little bit of wordplay.
Yeah. No kids for Johannes.
Like I'm sure if he wanted, he could put some children together, like not biologically his, but I'm sure he's got some around.
I'm sure he could put some children together. I mean, that sounds like it's definitely within his wheelhouse.
Yes.
So basically at this point, Ava just shoots Molly. I mean, she's had enough. She just pulls the gun up and shoots her. And
No one
Andy-
really questions
Yeah,
it.
no one.
Like,
No one's even like, wow. Or no one even seems to be surprised. Even I mean, it's just like bang. Molly, of course, is able to avoid the shot quickly enough. And basically swears a vengeance before disappearing. And then Jacob's bell starts to ring.
Nice. I hadn't even made that connection. Like between the name of the town and the bell tolling, but it really adds a whole lot of weight to what the bell tolling means for the whole town.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's like symbolically, it's the alarm system of the town. It's so good.
Yeah. It's pretty good. Yeah, so the bell rings 13 times. I mean, that's what Mags says. It hasn't rung 13 times
Yeah.
by the time the chapter ends, but it's ringing. And basically, this is explained to us that Molly is using her wraith powers to basically signal to everybody that it's time for stuff to pop off.
Yeah.
It's happening.
Yeah, the dam has broken. This whole arc has been drilling into us how much firepower there is here, and Molly just opened the floodgates.
Yes, and so we know that negativity is kind of permeating through the town. It's interesting because this happens basically concurrently with the stuff that we saw in the last two chapters. But we didn't hear any bell ringing, but presumably it's happening around the same time that Rose is making her deal, you would think.
I get the impression this is... I think Blake was already in the mirror when this part started to go down.
But Jeremy does hear that stuff has gone down with Mags and Molly, so there's some overlap there.
Absolutely. But I have a feeling this bell stuff going off is probably when Blake is already in the mirror.
Yeah, okay.
Just because I've given up on believing that there's excuses for Rose doing what she does.
Yeah, yeah, no excuses for her. So the bell tolls, and the chapter ends with Andy thinking, you know what, one of these days I'm just going to blow up every damn practitioner in this town. And, yeah.
And
it ends on a happy
smiling.
note. Yeah.
He's smiling as he thinks it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to condone any mass killings with rocket launchers or anything, but, if you had to pick some people...
yeah, no, I mean, it's... I feel like
hard to
it's
argue
fair.
with the logic of the problems this would solve, just rocket launching the church while they're all in it.
Yep. I mean, Andy is dedicated. Andy really is the only person we've seen be, well, Blake to an extent, but be very dedicated to the innocents in town, right? I mean, Mags as well,
Yeah.
Mags, Blake, but Andy and Ava, potentially, but you get the sense she doesn't care about it that much.
She just likes the killing,
Yes.
She's the sort of person you point at what you want killed for productive reasons.
Yeah.
And just make sure there's always something to point her at.
But yeah, Andy's, he's here for the innocents, which I'm all for. If it means kill every practitioner, it's the price you got to pay.
Yeah. I mean, as I sort of said, like, you can see how many problems it could solve, taking them all out.
Yeah. I do think it also probably would cause some problems, right?
Yes.
Like, practitioners do play a role in keeping people safe, despite some of them not wanting to.
It would create a very volatile situation, for sure. But yeah, no, this is a fun chapter. As I sort of said, just sort of to round it out, I think looking at Andy in this way gives us a really neat insight into the world, into exactly how Jacob's bell goes to shit at the end here, and gives us, like, I think it's so interesting to compare Andy to Blake and to Rose and Eva, through him as well.
Yeah.
Like, I really like how this sort of ties up an arc that I think was defined by us expecting the shit to hit the fan.
And it does. Yay!
Yes.
I'm terrified to see what happens next chapter.
I can't wait. It's going to be gloriously horrible.
Yes. And that's the end of Mala Fide. So now that this arc has ended, why don't we kind of loop back around and talk about what we think are the key takeaways from this arc? And of course, we should start with the title of the arc itself, Mala Fide, which means bad faith, intent to deceive, right? Being Mala Fide means you're acting with intent to deceive. You're acting in bad faith.
Yeah.
And I mean Rose, right? Rose is the Mala Fide in this chapter, right? Like, I don't know if there's a way to... I mean, there's other meanings that you can read into it, but I think the main one is Rose Mala Fide. Rose.
Yes. I think given how 10.7 went down, it's hard to argue with the fact that she definitely felt like, from Blake's perspective, that she stabbed him a whole bunch in the back. And, yeah, it's kind of manipulated things there. With everyone.
Yeah. Although, honestly, if we're talking about people acting in bad faith, there's a fair amount of them. I don't know.
Yeah, and not just in this arc. I mean, that's basically the whole book, right? Everyone's constantly acting in bad faith. I think, like also, sort of, Mala Fide can just mean, like, illegally, like, to do something, you know, like, to do something in bad faith that's just against the law.
Yeah.
And I mean, we saw some examples of this, like when Jezza blew open the house, that redefined, well, that broke all the rules we thought sort of existed.
Yeah.
So that's sort of arguably a Mala Fide moment. But yeah, I think, this, unless I'm missing it, I think that the arc title here has a little bit less thematic resonance with everything that went on, or like less... You know, not as many different sorts of meanings, and I think that's because this felt to me like the start of the second half of the book, if that makes sense. Like, it's almost another introduction arc where we've really re-established Jacob's Bell and where everyone stands, and, you know, obviously based on how this ends, now we're getting into it.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Yeah, I guess Arc 10 is the turning point, right? Arc 9 was our null arc, and now, yeah.
Yeah, Arc 9 sort of brought the end of the first half of the story together and set us up for the second half, but this one was the one that really sort of established or re-established most of what we're going to see in this second half, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that feels fair to me. So let's talk about some of the themes this arc, what we think the key thematic through lines were, what we think we take away from this arc going forward.
Yeah, so I think one we've talked about a lot was, you know, Blake re-establishing himself in the world, which of course ties into that idea of it being the re-establishment of the second half of the story. The arc opened with him literally being cut off from the house, which was his old tie to the world, you know, that was sort of his old base, and the story quite explicitly went, no, you can't go back here. And, you know, then he sort of got to compare himself to Mags's solution for the similar problem she went through. And then he sort of ultimately fell back into bad habits and has now ended up stuck in a mirror. So I'm super excited to see where he goes from here, because I think the last two chapters, or his last two chapters of the arc, were really defined by him sort of falling into the same traps that got him into the abyss. And I think he's hopefully going to have time to reflect on that.
God, I hope so. Right? Like, I thought he would have had that time when he was, you know, during Null, but he really just did the same exact damn mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I sort of gave him shit last chapter for being like, oh, you should have gone with Mags and Molly to the church because coming to Rose was the bad decision. And then we see what went down in the church. There's no way he could have helped there either. So I'm wondering if the lesson here for Blake is that maybe he just doesn't always need to dive in. But that kind of goes against everything I've been saying about not becoming part of the system. I'm so interested to see where Blake takes this or what lessons he learns from it, because I'm conflicted myself on what lessons I feel like he should take from it.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we kind of touched on this last chapter, right? Where the real lesson is stop playing the game, Blake. Stop, like, stop doing this.
Yeah, but again, like, if you stop playing completely, at what point are you enabling the system, you know? Like,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, he obviously the reason he kept playing was because of his friends, right? And it's like, Blake, they're not worth it, man. Come on. I'm like, if I were Blake, okay, I want to go hunt the bad things. I made that promise to Evan. Alright, I'm gonna do that. Go off, fucking go to, I don't know, Toronto, or fuck that, go to Ontario, go somewhere else. And just do shit there for a while, man. Like, if Evan wants to come, he can come. Whatever. Just go hunt bad things somewhere else where it's not so, I don't know, terrible for you.
It's going to be really interesting because I feel like if I were Blake, the fact that I turned down Faisal's offer earlier in this arc would be hovering in the back of my mind for the whole rest of this book.
Yeah.
I'm going to be very interested to see whether at the end of this book, we can say with any certainty whether that was the right call or not.
I mean,
because at the moment it seems like a hard no, but we don't know where he's going to go from here.
do you think because we talked about the lawyers being his out for a while. Do we think that Faisal is still possibly an out for him? I mean, he's turned down the deal, but maybe it can still be on the table? I don't know.
I really like that comparison to the lawyers because that's exactly how I view Faisal and Johannes. It's the deal with the devil. I'm all for that comparison. I think you're right. This will be the get out of jail free card from the lawyers 2.0, like going and serving Johannes in whatever form that takes. I do not believe it will be as a...
I mean, it's doing a favour for him, right? I mean, it's basically exactly what the lawyers...
No, actually, I think it was explicitly like joining his team permanently.
Well, permanently, what is that? I'm sure there's wiggle room in there.
Well, I'm sure it's mostly that your energy joins him permanently. I don't know how much yourself gets to be a part of it, but anyway.
Yeah. I think we come from different levels of pro Johannes stances.
Oh, we definitely do. But anyway, let's find out in the future.
Yeah, that's the end of Mala Fide, Arc 10, and that's the end of our episode discussing it as well. So what a coincidence! But don't worry, if you want more discussion on Mala Fide 10.x or any other stuff that we've talked about so far, there's a place to go for that. A place where everybody knows your name, and that place is the Parahuman subreddit. And you find the link to the discussion thread that you can comment in and discuss with everybody posted down in the description of this episode down below.
Yes, and we also have Twitter and an email address that we're contactable by.
Yeah.
And because this is already a very long episode, I'm not even going to list them. I'm just going to combine this all and say, if you head to doofmedia.com, it's listed there, and you can find out everything, including, those email and Twitter addresses and a whole bunch of other stuff. And this probably took longer than me just saying them, but I've committed now.
Yeah, you have. So you can check out our Twitter, which I won't tell you, and email us, and I also won't tell you, at doofmedia.com. You can also find a bunch of other shows on the Doof Media Network. A new episode of Weaver Dice just came out, which nobody expected, but it's here, and can't wait to listen to it. A new episode of What You Say, the hottest, freshest new podcast on the Doof Media Network. And the fan art contest is kicking off from today, or is that right?
Yes, I think we'll start accepting submissions today. I don't know. They're announcing it simultaneously on We've Got Ward right now.
Yep. I can hear them just over there.
They're just in the other studio.
Just in the other Doof studio. Yeah.
So obviously, we probably should have mentioned this at the start as well. We'll do that next episode. But the fan art contest that is traditionally a Parahumans only affair will be opening up to Pact art. Because I think we're finally far enough into this story that we think that most of the fan art you're able to produce will be somewhat relevant to us.
So everybody who's read the rest of the story, no fan art about that scene. You know the one I'm talking about.
Yeah. So the theme of this fan art contest is reflections.
Interesting. I'm not sure how that will fit into doing Pact fan art, but I'm sure you big brain people can figure out a way.
Yeah, it's obviously very obtusely, related to Pact.
Yeah, no, I'd love to see some Pact fan art. I mean, we can. I'm just going to say it now. We can totally win this fan art contest, folks. Let's do it.
Yes, and if you want to help us, the best way to do that is to become a Patreon, because the patrons are the ones who get to vote in that fan art contest.
Yes. To become a patron of Doof, you can go to patreon.com/doofmedia and check out all the great perks that you get. Not just voting on Fanart, but also voting on other things, and also the Discord and access to the Duff and Chill streams, the next one of which is coming out quite soon, which is exciting. Coming out, I shouldn't say coming out, we're live streaming it, so it'll be being created. All kinds of good perks on there.
And of course, we always mention Wildbow's Patreon, and we kind of do it in the same way because it's hard to come up with a new way to do it, and I'm not as creative as him. So if you want to support really creative people, just go to Wildbow's Patreon, patreon.com/Wildbow.
Yeah.
And he'll create more of these creative things.
Yeah, definitely. It's true. I've heard it. I've heard it said. And that's us. That's us for this chapter. Don't worry, there'll be another chapter in 2 days. Yay! And that chapter will be talking about malfeasance. New arc. 11.1 coming out on Friday the 6th. So we'll see you then.
Man, that arc name does not bode well. We'll see you on Friday.
Did you think it was just suddenly going to be a happy ending now, Elliot? Or what?
Just the next arc was going to be called Release.
Yay time! The next arc's going to be pizza delivery. It's here. Anyway, all right, see ya.
See ya.